Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our next edition of a Dun & Bradstreet webinar, where we'll be launching our white paper and analyzing the white paper called India and the Nordics, an emerging hotspot for businesses. Before we begin the webinar, I'd just like to set some ground rules. None of the audience members will have the opportunity to talk during the webinar so that there's no disruption during the webinar. In case you have any questions that you would like to ask during the course of the webinar, we would request you to kindly note them down and put those questions up through the Q&A tab, which is available on your screen, and we will have them answered at the end during the Q&A session. I will now hand it over to Avinash to start the session.
Hi, thanks, Costa. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to hopefully a good 1 hour of discussion. My name is Avinash, and I've got two other colleagues of mine on the call here. Dr. Arun Singh, who is our global economist, and Alok Kumbat, who is a director and has been with the firm a very long time. He looks after a lot of our data, and obviously he has a lot of insights in terms of what we're talking about today. So today we are talking about a connectivity between India and a land fairly far, I guess fairly remote for many Indians, which is up north in the Nordics, as we call it, in Scandinavia. I think the Scandinavian companies were one of the earlier investors in the Indian marketplace, and they're some very old familiar names who maybe actually operate a lot in the B2B space, so you don't hear of them that often. Obviously, IKEA has come around the corner now, which is a much more B2C name. So I guess, but they've been around. They invested for a long time. One of my previous lives, I was a banker, and we did a lot of work for Scandinavian companies, large Scandinavian companies, who had invested into India, and we're looking to grow. We're looking for acquisition opportunities. We're looking for capital. We're looking to restructure businesses to make them more effective. So the Scandinavians are great, very patient partners, and our aim today is to really to grow the corridor. And some of the observations we have seen through what we see the usage of data by companies in Scandinavia, most of them who are our clients there, and some of them who are not our clients as well. So as most of you know, we are Dun & Bradstreet. We've been based in India for a long time. We're a very old legacy firm globally. We are the biggest carriers of B2B data globally, and that's really what gives us the insight and possibly the ability to make some possible commentary and thoughts as to how some of these corridors could be taken forward and grown from an Indian context. Dun & Bradstreet itself has made a very large investment into the Nordic markets. Earlier this year, in January this year, we closed, as we say in this business, on a transaction, and we bought a business called Bisnode, which is actually headquartered out of the Nordics, but a pan-European business, and that has further established and strengthened our footprint in that part of the world. So the Scandinavia is really a very native market for us, I would say. It's not a foreign market, it's a pure domestic market, having now bought a business there and having many of our colleagues and many of our relationships based in that part of the world. In fact, the previous chairman of Bisnode is one of the members of our international advisory board. So we're very keen and to grow the Dun & Bradstreet business there, but more from an India perspective, we're very keen to make sure that there is a lot more better connectivity between India and the Nordics, and we are hoping to play our part in that, and that's really the objective of this webinar. So let me press on. We've got a tight schedule. We've got lots to talk about. So we are hoping to cover between the three of us, and hopefully some questions towards the end from you. Really give you a little bit of update on what's happening in the markets, which I think all of us see the disruption. I'll touch upon that. Then I'll hand over to my colleagues to present the findings of the specific white paper we are talking about. And then some thoughts really on how possibly, Dun & Bradstreet could better help people in the ecosystem to really benefit from the insights and the data and all the things which we can pull together given the depth of data we have for your businesses and companies as you look to prosper from this corridor. So moving to, I just got a few slides and maybe I'll talk through that. Clearly, I think, we are living in interesting times. When you were younger, people told you that, change is the only constant. The Chinese proverb, may you live in interesting times. I think we are all living in very interesting times. And who knows what's around the corner, post New Year and Christmas. All kinds of assumptions and predictions can be made. But I guess we are a lot safer than we were earlier in our summer. And we hope that it may remain that way, and that uh, each tide or each wave does pass, and by which time everybody is a lot stronger and able to survive through. So what's happening is some of these things which we are listed on these slides, but from an Indian perspective, clearly, India itself is in a very nice spot in terms of what's happening in the global ecosystem, the global geopolitical system. And there obviously is a lot of attention in terms of, global companies, footprint, diversification of manufacturing, and capital flows from investors, which is more, maybe if I could put portfolio or diversification. And then in terms of obviously corporates, in terms of strategic capital, FDI capital into India. And I think India also has helped itself a lot over the last, been helping itself a lot over the last 2 decades, but over the last 5 years, I think there's been a renewed focus in terms of trying to make sure that things around making business happen are made a lot easier. It can always be better, but the ease of doing business, trying to ensure that India has a much better and rightful place in the whole trade system globally, increasing our share of exports, which the government is very keen. I think all of us are very keen, given that it helps the entire ecosystem. And specifically in terms of Nordic, and more so now in terms of the free trade agreements and things of that kind, which India is looking to enter into many countries and many trading blocks, which should really help in terms of the trade flows and the investment flows. So I think that from a macro point of view is a good thing. And maybe coming out of the pandemic, there'll be a large number of laggards, if I can call it, maybe a large number of losers as well. So if you're on the other side of the spectrum and you are in the category of the people who survived and are in the winner category, you may not be the biggest winner, but at least you will benefit a lot more from that ecosystem. Clearly, I touched upon the whole diversity of manufacturing base, which, given the geopolitics, a lot of the large companies are looking to do. And mostly everybody was centered around China, and everybody's looking to diversify. A lot more countries are benefiting much better from that today from India, maybe. And, who knows where finally the dice will roll out, Vietnam and some of the other countries in ASEAN and Southeast Asia. But India definitely has a role there, and we're seeing that. We're seeing that in some of the discussions which we're having with our clients here, where people are now talking to new joint venture partners. We also have a consulting and advisory arm where we are happy to have those discussions, where companies are reaching out to joint venture partners. Companies are modeling as to if a second in manufacturing base had to be set up in India, how would that work? And we clearly see that given our data and analytics, we are able to give insights into some of these very complex sectors, which will obviously be large pockets of growth for the economy as well. And clearly, the first step, which my colleagues will touch upon as well, in terms of market expansion and doing business in new markets, or even more so in today's world, the other thing we have clearly noticed over the pandemic is that everybody's worried about who they're doing business with. If you're giving an order, you're equally worried that will I get my goods on time, and if I'm owed some money, I'm obviously very worried if will I get paid on time. So the legitimacy and the credibility of potential business partners and the underlying financial information and other non-financial information as well is really a very critical element in any decision making. And as I mentioned in my opening comments, Dun & Bradstreet being the largest carrier of B2B data, really the amount of data we have, the granularity of the data, the depth of the data, we are able to give you some unique insights when you start looking at new markets, new partnerships, new products, new greenfield investments or brownfield investments as well. So clearly, given that track record and information which we have in terms of the trends of the business inquiries, we have based this white paper on that, and we will come to some of the comments which we'll make on the relationship happening around the world. So clearly, things getting more complex on a daily basis, and I'll touch upon this chart as well towards the end. It just shows you that, I guess, as businesses become more complex, businesses become more global, people are really checking, as I was saying, the volume of inquiries, checking on each other a lot more frequently. Equally, the whole face of fraud is changing, combating fraud, which, businesses and individuals who have a lot of money on that is becoming a huge challenge. The governance and the regulations around privacy, cybersecurity, environmental and public health, all really challenges, not sideshows anymore. So for a business to be doing business, I mean, this is really center stage now. You can't really say, I will do business and I will manage all this. I think today, to manage a business, set up a business, these are center stage activities. You need to take care of that as well, and possibly first, rather than, setting up a business. And, ESG, which is becoming equally powerful as a tool for deciding where capital goes. ESG become very important for the whole supply ecosystem. And, just the whole corporate investor ecosystem is going to play a lot more stress on ESG. And again, we hope at Dun & Bradstreet that we'll be at the forefront of that in terms of providing insights, in terms of providing scores, in terms of providing gap analysis, in terms of providing ESG seals, not only for large, but also for possibly, SME and MSME players. I just came back actually from a lunch with a fund manager who's looking to launch a fund based on ESG principles and looking to invest only, in companies with very highly compliant with ESG and looking to raise capital on that basis. So these are things which are very important to the Scandinavians. The Scandinavians have always been very compliant. I know there is a very famous lady, as you know, very young lady, Greta Thunberg, who's kind of pretty much she shook the whole world in terms of her views, and she's actually from Scandinavia. So the Scandinavians have always been, and we hope to be able to provide those insights to our Nordic partners and to companies from that part of the world. I touched upon supply chains, and obviously the challenge for companies to not only grow in all the complexities, but also to fight at the same time with all this increasing regulation, which is in a good way, but obviously, new stuff always creates challenges and creates disruption as well. So I think, the point, I think we talk a lot about the Nordic, we talk about our insights and what we're seeing between the geographies, what's happening there. But from a Dun & Bradstreet perspective, I guess we want to grow, all of you want to grow, all companies want to grow, and clearly to thrive and grow and achieve what we need in that ecosystem. You need better insights, you need better to-go data, and to be able to manage that disruption, having better quality data and insights obviously is most useful. This is two graphs here which you can see that the WTO was signed 20 years ago. The entry of China into the WTO was signed 2 decades ago, December 2001, an event which is actually a very landmark event. People, when you talk about 2001, everybody remembers 9/11. But I think from our economics and Arun's point of view, the entry of China into the WTO really has changed the dynamics of the whole global economy. We have to look at it that way. So trades become more global, companies have become more global, and you can see that by the level of inquiries. So in the Indian context, we have tens of millions of inquiries made on Indian companies by somebody in our ecosystem. These are investors outside, companies outside, and you can see that we ourselves in India have seen the explosion of that, and that's also partly because we've got a lot better at managing our data, breadth of data and depth of data as well. So we are close to close down to maybe 450 million companies globally. In terms of our database, it's unrivaled. In India, we have what we call as our DUNS number on close to 23 million entities and companies, which is also unrivaled. And we hope to continue to increase that. So I think, Dun& Bradstreet and through our partners, we do all the complex and detailed work of, sourcing the data, verifying the data, both from a financial and risk perspective, and also from a, compliance and onboarding perspective, and also from a sales and marketing perspective, making it easier for you to find new markets, new clients by using our data rather than being left out in the cold. So my urging would be for you to leverage us, leverage our skill sets, leverage our data as you look at not only the Indian market, but all the various investment corridors, which India is getting a lot more active in. And my colleague Alok will touch upon in today's session a lot more on that. So maybe at this point, let me hand over to Arun, who will take you through the finding the white paper, and then maybe I can come back along with my colleagues for some questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Avinash. That was wonderful insight, and I think you touched based on many point, many subject, and two things basically I'll talk about, and I'll pick from there what you basically spoke about. One, of course, you talked about the globalization, and that's a subject I think last 30 years got a traction. I mean, in India we have seen those elements, especially after 1991 when we liberalized economic policies, and of course China has accelerated that development across many countries, and we can see those traction happening. And of course our relation with Nordic countries, and I think you touched base in terms of not just recent, it's a historical. I think there is a legacy we can talk about. At any country, what's happening, even if I have to look at some of the data in India, the globalization rate has surged significantly. We talk about export, import, both at a services sector and the goods, that's gone up significantly. Our entire economy, the significant portion is now open, what you call, openness basically, and that's surge. And it's not by luck, it's not by all of a sudden happen. There's a conscious effort being taken by the company operating within India and within the Indian geography, and then company operating outside Indian geography. And there's a conscious effort to increase the trade, tap the new market, tap the new product group, tap the new services. And as a result, you can see those channel of communication started with most of the new countries and new sector, new segment. The idea is that how we can become one globe, putting many product at one side and one services, so as at least reach is very easy. And I think we started taking a benefit of this one last 10 years. If I have to basically talk about India's search, there's a focus in terms of the competitiveness, there's a focus in terms of signing those agreement with the various government. It's not about free trade agreement, and there could be a different viewpoint about those free trade agreement. It's always about how those diplomatic conversation happening from a government to government, what they want to promote between two government, between two countries, what area they want to expose, where they want to basically collaborate, where they want to complement. All those things play into picture, and to be very honest, that's outcome of that is basically your export, import, and the trade between two countries, whether you talk about FDI, FI, and other stuff. Prior to that, there's a single point basically we have, which is basically could be taken as a leading indicator of that, is basically DNB inquiries data. And we have tested the DNB inquiries data as a leading indicator of export, import between two countries. It's a leading indicator of that, how seasonality in the inquiry data will lead to some of the sectoral changes in some of the other sectors. So for example, when we're looking at the US data, the festive season demand start when talk about the consumer goods or some other stuff that starts somewhere in May, June, something. The Valentine Day push in terms of the floral and other stuff, that's a February, but the demand for the inquiry for that sometime comes into the December or November. So there's a leading indicator, and there is a basically one incipient sign that which direction export, import, and the trade is going up. The inquiries in data not always necessarily is being export import, is also about those trust factor, those also about how the relationship is basically going up. And that's precisely we have looked at some of the data between Nordic countries and India to see that how those channel of discussion between government to government, between company to company, is playing a role for wider level of communication, and the discussion is not just between the sectors, between companies, also about what are the ecosystem one these two region can create. And that's precisely I think Avinash touched base in a large in his opening comment, and I thought let me talk about some of those findings what we got. These findings are basically talking about where the inquiries coming in, what type of sectors they are inquiring, and what do it mean, why that's happening. Is it, let's say, one-off? Is it a conscious effort? And what the basically future look like? Those are some of those point I'll try to touch base. And one on the slide, on the screen, one can see is basically we have looked at our database. There are many companies, and there's some of these highlighted companies. We have looked at, there are 200 something around 300 Nordic companies or subsidiaries we have, and more we have from the Sweden, then Denmark, and then Finland, and of course there is less companies in the Iceland countries. Look at the distribution of what you call Indian companies in the Nordic countries. What I'm trying to say, that it's not just a one-way route, it's a two-way, where we have this engagement. It's not just the Nordic companies coming in and investing in India, also Indian companies are basically going and investing in India. So basically it's a dual relationship happening. Now, given that there is a wide variety of areas in terms of the discussion point, in terms of exploration point, and I think Avinash touched base in terms of the compliance, fraud, supply chain, and other element. There are basically market potential. There are basically looking at new sector where someone wants to penetrate in terms of the market potential. And pandemic has shown that way, because during the pandemic, I think most of the company on this planet, they are looking for the something new partner, and that's happening. Whether they're talking about the nearshoring, whether they're talking about the competitive market, whether they're looking at some government to government dialogue, and that's what it's looking at. So in a nutshell, what I'm trying to talk about, that this relationship is not one way. This relationship is both ways. Companies in the Nordic interested in the countries in companies in the India, and the same from India side. Look, if you can go on the second slide, please. So when I looked at my inquiries data last 3-4 years, look at the jump. The Nordic companies inquiring about Indian companies, and this is the index data. So, and the 2017 is 100. So in 2017, for example, if the number of inquiries in terms of the index value was 100, today that's more than 1,500, and that's close to 1,800. In fact, every year there's a 100% jump happening, and that's CAGR last 3-4 years. You can see this is not by what by magic or some luck. This is conscious effort by various government in the Nordic and government in India in order to channelize our competitiveness, our energy, and showcasing our capability to the Nordic companies, and the Nordic companies are showing capabilities to the Indian companies. What together we can come and talk about that. Alok can go. So that was a surge on an overall level. When you look at some of those sector, almost 50%, 1 in 2 inquiries by the Nordic companies incoming in the manufacturing. That surge you have seen last 2 years, especially after the Make in India initiative launched by the government. Initially, it took some time for the government to educate the world player and showcase our capabilities, how the manufacturing company can partner with the global counterpart to create a good manufacturing hub. Initially took a time, but look at the benefit. Now that's coming in, and that have been accelerated during the pandemic times. And we all have seen the interest of the global company, especially from the Nordic side in India, that's surging and that's going up. The second one can see the services sector, and then there are wholesale trade, the transportation. Basically, there are many sectors. There are government to government inquiry also happening in the public administration, but that's very small. But the 50% of that's happening in the manufacturing sector. So there are many manufacturing sectors. I'll touch base some of that. But the idea is that how we can tap this opportunity, and how we can tap this information in the sense why they are looking at what are the basically the core point of touch point. It is the compliance, is it the competitiveness, is it basically they want to find out new supplier, uh, whether we manufacture in India, where we are going to sell, is it in the India, is it in the abroad? All those are basically, there are many questions to this one, and I think there are many answers to that, and we should think about it, and we should try to leverage all those potential offered by this dual relationship. If you can go on the next slide. So let me talk about relationship between Denmark and India in terms of the inquiry. If you can see the volume of inquiries made by Danish businesses in Indian businesses, that grew in the CAGR of something around 84% between 2017 to 2021. Chemical manufacturing sector received the highest share in that one. About 50% of inquiries in the chemical sectors were made in the companies that manufactures pharmaceuticals and allied products. So that we can see last few months, few quarter, why that's happening because of this pandemic. They're looking at some new trading partner, new manufacturing partner that's happening. In terms of the growth in the volume of inquiries received between these 2 years, 2017, 2021, company engaged in the manufacturing of measuring, analyzing, or controlling instrument top the chart. That's that's one thing, followed by businesses engaged in the manufacture or the sale of jewelry. Why? Because that's reflecting the export. Increase in these sectors, inquiries are also reflected in export import between these two countries. Between these 2 years, 2017 and 2020, roughly around 14% growth we have seen in the what you call wooden products. Something around 26% growth we have seen in the jewelry, something around less than 8% growth we have seen in the food products. All this data coming through the export. And that's precisely the point that I'm talking about 2017 to 2021 data, where the huge inquiry happening and our export to Denmark have gone up. And that's what I was trying to say, that these inquiries are actually the leading indicator of actual trade between these two countries, and that's reflecting here. If you can go on the next slide, please. Yeah, so that's Finland. Now, it's a slightly different story. While inquiries, number of inquiries in terms of the growth rate is higher than the Denmark, but in terms of sector representation, that's a difference. So inquiries something around 150% jump. The Finland companies inquiring in what you call in Indian companies. That's such. And the primary metal products, if you see, the manufacturing sectors received the highest volume. And the second was the business services. In terms of the growth, in terms of the volume, if you see, I think business services were the second one. Now, if you talk about some of, in terms of export, we have seen the similar trend. There is a imported goods happening from the Finland. That's in fact 3.1% between 2007 and between 2017 and 2021. Machinery goods have gone up. So again, if I look at the contract data, if I look at some of those WTO data in terms of the export import, that's justified looking at this trend. Whereas metal, primary metal and some of these sectors are topping the list. Now moving on to the other slide, this Norway, we have a same trend here. The good thing is that this is same 150% jump between 2017 to 2021. Here sector is different. Here we have a food and kindred products that's topping the list. 254 times one can see between these 2 years. Look at the jump, 144% we have seen in terms of the export of processed and food products between these 2 years. So exactly this is the point. Now we were talking about those quality, we're talking about the competitiveness. It seems that there is an increased trust, increased increased what you call engagement of Norway company in India, and that's inquiries gone up. At the same time, export of this product gone up by 150%, chemical export gone up by 29%, machinery export gone up by 9%. These all are showing those indications that these businesses are inquiring about India just to understand that how they are going to be a good trading partner for for a future. That's a reflection of this increased trust. Now, if you go on the fourth country, what we're talking about, the Sweden, I think we have a similar trend here. The same thing, the number of inquiries going up. Now, here we have a different sector. Here we have industrial and commercial machineries, computer equipment that's gone up, 78 times between these 2 years. Now, if I have to look at export, same trend continues. Here, the export of transport equipment, that's basically the fourth, that's gone up by 12%. What exactly I was trying to talk about that these inquiries are always considered as some of the great leading indicator for export import and for some other payment behavior, for other competitiveness and other stuff. Those are the four countries we covered in our report, and those are the sectoral mix looking like. Now, let me explore and let me try to explain that this development is not by a luck, it's not it's just an overnight development. There's a conscious effort taken by two government, Nordic government inside all the countries and along with the India and Indian government alone, increasing the ease of doing business. If you look at the ease of doing business, of course, there is some concern and about those index and shut now. But when it was operational till 2019, in the last year, look at the surge. If I have to basically talk about two set of year, one 2014 and 2019, where ease of doing business India stands as compared to other developing market, what we call BRICS, basically those adding South Africa into the BRIC nation. India, in terms of ease of doing business in 2019, look at the surge. It's around 79 places, and we have literally surged. And that's basically the focus of the Indian government into this one, and that's created increased thrust of the most of the global companies and coming and inquiring about Indian counterpart. That's one thing. Now, there's a second one. Alok, if you can go on the second slide. Business climate. This, there's a global business climate survey done on 2020-21. If you look at from that perspective, the percentage of the Swedish companies perceiving business climate as good or very good, India ranks fourth after US, China, and Netherlands, and there are many other countries basically behind India. So this is another element. The business climate is more favorable in India than many other developed and developing countries, and that's again the conscious effort taken by the government, which is great sign. Now, if you move on the second, market potential. The market potential is another area where company can come in, invest, and stay there, because when you produce or you do some of the trade, most of the time the company are looking to sell in the local market, and exactly the case here. In about 16-17 years from now, India is projected to be the second biggest economy in the world, taking over US from the PPP terms, and that's a huge opportunity for most of the global player and come and have do the trade with the Indian companies, and that's exactly reflecting in our inquiries data within the Dun & database cloud. Now, if you go on the second slide, yeah, and this is the area probably last couple of slides when talks about government to government reach between last 4 years. While we call bilateral agreement, but there are conscious effort taken by the government to build those relationships. Whether you talk about smart cities, clean tech, clean energy, smart grid, energy research, Internet of Things, digitization, all these areas where both government have signed the memorandum of understanding at a diplomatic level and a high level committee level to work together. And these are the some of those important 8 areas of from the laundry list of many potential area of engagement between two companies, between two countries, and where both government wants to take it ahead. And I think companies operating within this one, and then what we call a eco-sheet system around these 8 core areas will certainly going to get a benefit through this cooperation. And with that, I think I'll pause on finding of explaining the finding of white paper. Now, as Avinash was talking about earlier, that we are tracking these inquiries from the bottom of the pyramid, and I think we have the data as on yesterday. That's exactly the frequency of the data capturing for the inquiries works for us. In that scenario, we explored those possibility and those potential areas of engagement. In those areas, how DNB can help and how DNB can work with all of you is basically, I think Alok is going to touch base and talk about that. Yes, Alok. Thank you.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here at the release of the white paper, India and the Nordics, an emerging hotspot for businesses. Thanks, Avinash, for sharing your thoughts around managing disruption in this changing business dynamics, and Dr. Arun for covering the main thrust from the white paper. I have about 10 minutes and we'll try to cover these 3 areas. Number 1, how does DNB go about in terms of tracking these businesses in our ecosystem? Number 2, how our solutions are framed to meet the requirements on the sales side, on the risk side, on the compliance side, on the finance side. And the final thing, how profiling yourself within the DNB ecosystem can bring in credibility and visibility. To begin with, our global data strategy and management approach starts wherever possible with the robust foundation of official public records, which essentially starts from an official business registration, wherein we capture the legal entity and assign a proprietary unique identifier, which is a DNB DUNS number. The DUNS number is used around the world to identify and access information on businesses. Once the DUNS number is assigned, we then start building upon and enriching the proprietary and the public data, both structured as well as unstructured. We monitor activity and signal insights to measure the digital footprint of the businesses. All these are done within the ambit of data governance as well as quality controls. There are potential partners, lenders, wherein they make requests about the businesses and they use these DUNS number to identify any information on that particular entity. Equally, you could also use the DUNS number to access the same information about any company with which you might wish to work with. In terms of trying to capture information on businesses, we track 6 phases in the life cycle of the businesses. And it is important to understand that at which phase of the business cycle or the life cycle the business is into. Right from discovering entities at the earliest point of establishment, we fingerprint them with a unique identifier as I talked about the DUNS number, all the way through the closure of the business. As a part of the process, we constantly listen and look out for information or indicators of growth in a company, or if the company has reached its maturity stage, or if the company is into a decline phase, or probably they are reinvigorating in terms of developing new strategies to come back on track, finally to go into out of business stage. We lay very special emphasis in terms of trying to identify information, which essentially could be derogatory legal events, payment performance of the company, whether they're making payments on time or not, linkage information, so on and so forth. We also leverage a lot around the alternate data sets to uncover hidden trends within the businesses. The next slide essentially talks about the coverages we have in the Nordic region. As Avinash talked about, that we at the start of the year made an acquisition of this company called Bisnord. This company actually covers in European as well as Nordic Scandinavian regions as well. And by this acquisition, we have seen the kind of commitment our organization had to meet our customer requirements. These regions have become highly relevant for Indian businesses, and the statistics which Arun talked about gives an emphasis in terms of the kind of trade which is happening between both the countries. There is a rich and comprehensive content that is made available to us, and this helps us in terms of reducing certain data gaps. By virtue of this acquisition, we have about 1 crore Nordic records which now form part of our database, and this enriches the information on the DNB data cloud. Interestingly, we have seen that when we were trying to analyze the information which was made available, we found that there were critical information, and these are information which actually decides, which actually decides in terms of how do we go about in terms of going ahead with doing a business or not. So there were certain critical information which we got access to. One, the credit limits. What's the kind of credit that can be granted to these businesses? You get to know about information on bankruptcy, whether these companies have filed for bankruptcy or on the road of getting into a bankruptcy. Various historical content around change in the key management personnel or information specifically around change in auditors, so on and so forth. These signal information assists us in multiple use cases. Like few examples being change in boards of director, which is quite frequent, could be a leading indicator of any red flag within the company. We have also seen multiple instances of frequent change in auditors, which could also be a red flag that there could be some problem within the company's financial statements. All these rich information now form part of the global supply chain, which you can access through our products. There are various steps that we go about in terms of building our information, right from collecting the information all the way through dissemination or distribution of our content. We are very, very mindful and careful in terms of the sources that we identify. Most of the prominent being government sources, there are compliance information, negative media articles, multiple signal data, alternate data, so on and so forth. Once we collect the data, we go about in terms of organizing and standardizing the information, post which we assign a dunce number to that particular entity. We are very particular about the source of information, as I talked about, because we believe that the information that we access should not be a one-time kind of a dump, but we should be able to continue to access the source on a sustainable basis. The reason being that once the data is built in, it's very important for us to keep the information updated and refreshed at a periodic intervals. That's where the maintenance bit comes in. When we talk about frequency of updates, the frequency of updates depends on a daily basis to monthly to weekly to half yearly, so on and so forth. It all depends on the source and the criticality of those information. There are various attributes that we have. One, the traditional attributes. Then there are certain derived new attributes that we come up with. And then there is the analytics studio, which is like a sandbox environment wherein we can actually have the customer data merge with the DNB data to come up with identifying new and predictive attributes, scores, delinquency, so on and so forth. These are eventually published into our products, and there are multiple ways to consume the content. It could be through the form of APIs, which could be Direct Plus or data blocks. There are user interfaces that we have developed through our Whoas platform, DNB Credit, DNB Onboard, DNB iAccess, and finally in the form of batch, which is through DNB Connect. Customers use us in terms of trying to see how they could enhance their business performance. As Avinash talked about, we have about 45 crore business records, which forms part of the database. Most of these businesses cuts across segments ranging from small businesses all the way through the huge corporates and everything in between. Data is very crucial in order to help business compete, grow, and thrive, whether that be in analyzing sales or supply chain or customer relationship. One of the key data points that we have is the trade payment information. We have about 20 crore odd unique global payment experiences, which actually helps to predict the payment behavior of the entity, which essentially helps us to identify whether you can expect the payments from the customer or from the customer in a timely manner or not. 90% of Fortune 500 companies rely on Dun & Bradstreet's data assets. The next part is a very, very interesting part. Arun talked about the insights on the checks which are happening from Nordic on Indian entities. There are day in, day out many new businesses which are getting registered within the database. Are the customers looking for this information? The prior slides actually talked about it. Of course, there are a lot of customers who keep looking into our database and identifying companies who would want to do business with. There are almost about 250 plus direct subsidiaries which are present in India. You add affiliates, you add some JVs, it takes us to the number 300. And we have seen 20x increase in interest by Nordic customers on Indian businesses over the last 3-4 years. How this helps is that whenever there are customers who are looking in for the DNB for companies on the DNB data cloud, you could actually have your information made available into the database. Because when they come, they would want to see which are the companies which are there before they go in terms of taking the decision. Some of the probable use cases of why customers look into our database. We have certain high-tech companies which leverage on DNB Data Cloud to identify new prospect to expand their footprint in certain sectors. We have seen customers who have come up with SME or startup focused solutions and they want to catch them young. BFSI segment leverages on our content at the time of customer onboarding. One of the key aspects for them is to understand relationships across businesses in the form of common KMPs or cross relationships across business. During the pandemic, we had a very, very interesting use cases specifically from e-com players. All of a sudden, a lot of these more brick and mortar sales started moving to online. During that situation, a lot of these e-com players got a plethora of requests from merchants and suppliers to onboard themselves. Going by the traditional method, there were a lot of time which was actually taken to onboard these suppliers. We worked on a POC with them in the form of having our API solutions integrating the content within the customer's ecosystem. This not only helped in terms of eliminating the backlog, but it significantly improved improving the SLAs in terms of onboarding these customers. We have the right data to serve multiple use cases, be it on the master data side, finance risk, compliance, marketing and sales, self-evaluation. We have the knowledge on how to do it. We have the right data to support it. We have seen it work well for multiple of our customers and would be great if you could start using our solutions. Finally, how do we go about in terms of helping the companies grow and thrive? First, we talked about our global coverage. which is the largest coverage on the B2B database that we have. We are very proud to state that we have the best matching capability and have about 124 odd patents which have been issued to DNB. We want our customers to be very confident when they leverage on our data. Our global privacy ensures compliance with applicable privacy and security requirements. This could be with regards to handling sensitive personal information or personal information, which could cover the California Consumer Privacy Act, the GDPR rules, and the recently introduced the privacy laws in China. We are closely monitoring the situation in India. The India Personal Data Protection Bill is doing the rounds within the Parliament. We keep a very close tab on these on all these various governance aspects and the policies and the regulations. We have implemented intelligence intelligence engines to curate and process information. Because we are handling about 45 crore odd companies database, we better have better systems to handle this volume and the data that keeps getting updated on a daily basis. We have a passionate team of quantitative analysts, PhDs, data advisors who continue to monitor these 2,500 attributes and keep coming up with interesting trends, trying to provide solutions to our customers. Finally, solutions can be connected within the customer ecosystem and are compatible to most of the applications the customers have. Plus, I was able to cover and provide a view in terms of how DNB tracks businesses, the right set of data that we have in terms of using it for multiple use cases, and finally, how being a part of the DNB ecosystem could bring in credibility and visibility to your organization. Thank you so much. I think we can open up for Q&A. Over to you, Kaustav.
Hi, everyone. So you can ask all your questions using the Q&A tab available on your screen now. Once you start posting your questions, we'll have them answered one by one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kaustubh. There is a one question I can see it's coming in. I think we talked about talking about the segment or the sectors of the inquiry, that's coming in. I think if you, there are basically many. It's depend on which country inquiry coming from, and and what is the interest area. There's and last 3-4 years when we looked at those data that vary from chemical and allied products to primary metal products to food and kinder products to industrial and commercial machineries. These are some of what you call the top sectors being inquired, and these again a reflection of which country we are talking about and where the interest lies in and what area of exposure they are looking at. So it's a good to see that there is some traction happen in some of what you call known sectors, and but some of those sectors were basically very small. Few years back, those got very traction recently. We talk about the transport equipment, whether you can see something called chemical. I think chemical has got major traction. Food and kinder products, if you see, that's have gone, a huge push. In fact, that's gone by something 254 times to I think something around 280 times for some of those market. So I think that it's a varied, it's country to country, that's varied. And okay, so that basically I have answered on behalf of in fact myself. I've answered. There's one question coming, Avinash, for you, and I think you have mentioned about this in your opening comment, but from as a in the concept perspective, as a leading DNB India, and from that engagement perspective, that what are the business perspective and how important these Nordic countries from a DNB India perspective, what future looking like, and how you see these Nordic countries partnering with us. I mean, especially DNB and DNB India, and then overall country going forward. And you touch base, but I think there's more about future. I think the person is asking.
Yeah, sure, Arun. I think, a couple of things which I covered in the opening comments, but some of the things, for example, as everybody knows, that one of the largest sovereign wealth funds is actually the Norway oil fund, which is more than $1 trillion, which is, a huge amount of money. And when you look at capital flows today, people are looking to put money away into countries where there is growth, there is stability of the investments, and these are large pockets of places to go and get very long-term stable capital. The Norway fund, the pension funds of all these Scandinavian companies and governments. So I think that is something clearly, if we are able to attract more capital, that has a multiplier effect on its own. As I mentioned, the Scandinavians are very good at hardcore core engineering. I would imagine the 5G and whenever 6G and all that, people like Ericsson and Nokia was the company everybody knew when it was a mobile phone manufacturer, but it does a lot of other stuff still which is relevant to the mobile domain. But Ericsson clearly is a serious provider of. So the point being that they're very hardcore engineering companies. I think Volvo, Alok had Volvo up as a logo on the slide. Volvo, like Jaguar, is owned by Ford. It was sold by Ford. Jaguar was bought by Tata's. Volvo was bought by a Chinese buyer, and it has progressed tremendously as a car manufacturer. And Volvo is one of the few car companies in the world which has said, I think by 2025, they will have all their cars as EV. They will not make combustion engine, period. So some of these companies are really at the cutting edge of design, of engineering. And all of these companies need a home base outside Scandinavia in terms of doing a lot of work. When I used to visit Scandinavia for business, believe it or not, on the shop floor of one of these engineering companies, the per hour cost of an employee at that point in time was around 45 euros an hour. And now it must be much higher. So you can imagine the arbitrage which these companies are looking for. So I think India has to, as Arun and Alok said, we have also to present ourselves as a home where these companies can base ourselves and hire people here and get a lot of things done. The arbitrage is tremendous. So there is no reason why these companies cannot continue to do what they do in their home markets, but for their growth, use India as a base in terms of engineering, in terms of design, in terms of back office and other BPO activities, which a lot of them have, a lot of other global companies have done more actively. So I think there is a tremendous potential for investment, employment, and through that, a lot of partnerships for also the domestic market here in India.
Thank you, Avinash, for such a wonderful insight on that. I hope I think that we continue in future. So I think there's a couple of questions coming. This is similar in nature. I think Alok talked about that, but I think it's basically coming from SME segment. If any of SME is already doing trade with some Nordic countries, how DNB can help?
Got it. So there could be multiple ways in terms of how you could benefit by using our services. One is that if you want to identify a potential candidate whom you would want to engage with or deal with, you can actually have information access on almost about 1 crore entities. And you can actually use that particular data to identify which are the ones that you should be engaging or dealing with. There are ratings, assessments, reports which are available. And those reports can help you in terms of trying to take a decision to engage with those businesses. The other is that the way when we have to look on a business within Nordic, I'm sure that given the fact that you are already engaging with Nordic market, I'm sure that Nordic would also be looking for information on you within on you as well. So being a part of the DNB ecosystem can actually amplify your visibility in the ecosystem, as well as the information availability will also give confidence to the Nordic customer who wants to deal and engage with you that, yeah, this is a company which is in existence in India. These are the promoters, this is the management, this is the credibility, and this is the kind of business that that particular entity is into. So that whole profile of the content would actually amplify your visibility within the ecosystem. And maybe just not within the Nordic market, but across the globe. We have almost like 250,000 customers across the globe who continue to look for information onto the DNB database.
Thank you, Alok. And it seems that you are a favorable speaker because the next question is coming for you, Malli. So, and this is related, but it's basically real-time case. The post-pandemic, are there any avenues for Nordic companies to look forward to working with suppliers in India? How do the companies who can consider as a trustworthy partners to Nordic companies, in fact, how we can ensure those companies coming to India, they are trustworthy, and how basically what are the mechanisms to showcase where is basically trust building exercise and
Absolutely.
how we can.
Got it. So typically when we talk about the DNB database, as Avinash talked about, we have close to about 22, 23 million odd companies within the database. When we are trying to build this particular information, there are over 100 plus sources from where we collate content and information and build the data or enrich the data on that particular business entity. Now, the information availability could be financial information. The information is around compliance. The information also covers aspects around the statutory liabilities associated with the entity, whether he's compliant with the GST regulations, whether they're making their tax payments on time or not, whether they have any kind of a default with any financial institution or with any other regulatory body, which gives you a view on just not financial aspects of the company, but also the non-financial aspects of the company. And as Avinash also talked about, ESG also is playing a very, very important and a critical role within the decision-making process. Customers now increasingly are looking at doing businesses with companies which are very, very clean, or at least they know the kind of risk associated with them before they take a decision. So in short, when I'm trying to build the information, it's just not based on minimal sources, but we have 100 plus sources from where we keep pumping in the information and keep refreshing the content on a daily basis. Hope that answered the question.
No, thank you, Alok. And I'm conscious of the time. I think we've already, behind schedule. So what I can do, I can take a last. There are many questions actually coming in, but I can just take a last question, which is basically is asking about how is DNB provide rating from a supply chain perspective or the suppliers companies. Avinash,
I didn't hear you. I didn't hear you. Say that again.
Yeah. Does DNB provide for company ratings from a supply chain perspective on Indian supplier? Companies?
Of course. So we obviously do that, Arun. But most important, maybe I'll answer the question in a little bit futuristic way. Also what we are hoping to do, and we have now the capability to do. And in 2022 onwards, we want to be in the ecosystem whereby we can do this also for very small suppliers, really for the SME and MSMEs, to maybe people like IKEA and some of the other ecosystem of the engineering companies as well, where we can take the dynamic data, as we call it, with consent, obviously, GST data, bureau data, bank account data, income tax data, and triangulate all that and give a much better, clearer view, not only for the supplier's benefit himself or herself, but also for the buyer and the larger customers' perspective, and to basically do this in a very automated and non-interfering way, on a very maybe timely, repetitive manner as well. And our dream would be that, maybe we can really help in putting the whole ecosystem together between small suppliers who are making something in very small towns and being able to interact through our DRS product with getting the visibility and credibility, getting the ESG seal to get the ESG credibility, and then to get the financial perspective as well. And that would really be wrapping everything up and should really help small Indian companies, small Indian proprietors, small Indian partnerships prosper. And that, I think, would really, if we can achieve that, that would be a great outcome for all of us in the country.
Thank you, Avinash. I think with that, I will close the Q&A because I think we are already timed out, but there are many questions and I promise that I will reply along with the recording of this session. So you'll get your answer. Thank you. Kaustubh, you want to conclude?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all our speakers for joining in today, and thank you to all our attendees who have joined. We will be sharing the white paper with you shortly, along with a recording of this webinar. In case your question did not get answered, or you have any further questions that you would like to ask any of our panelists today, please write to us at india@dnb.com. I'll spell it out, INDIA, India@dnb.com, and we'll have them answered for you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, again.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you.